They say, I know that if I show this sequence of images followed by a musical score that hits right here, you're going to feel something in your heart. And I
Oh
think
no.
movies are able to do it really well.
Oh no. I'm just thinking about Transformers right now. Oh no. I've been changed.
Welcome back to the Indie Magazine podcast. Madison, we are starting a brand new series today, Militainment.
This is a good one. I'm excited.
Do you know what militainment is?
Yeah, based on small conversations I've had with you, plus I've watched some YouTube videos about it. It's basically the US military funds Hollywood to portray them well. um,
You're not wrong.
and boy, do they do a good job at that.
They do a great job at that. And here's what I'll say about militainment. People have thought maybe this was only in the times of the World War One and Two films and television. Or maybe it was only around 9/11. Or maybe it was. No. This is far reaching, expansive, and as a history buff, it just tickles every little nerve of my history love to know exactly how far reaching, expansive, and storied militainment is. When you think of the word propaganda, what does it bring to mind for you?
Flyers dropping from the sky, like speakers in the corners of all the buildings being like obey, or puff pieces that like just do nothing but glow and shine on something.
Yeah, it evokes 1984, which evokes Nazi Germany, which evokes Stalin, which evokes communism. It just sounds bad in every way and shape and form of the word. Propaganda doesn't have to be a negative. And so I think when we talk about militainment, we have to make sure for everyone listening that we're not saying that all propaganda is bad propaganda, but we have to call it out as propaganda. And for our British listeners, we're not explaining having a really good look at something, not a propaganda. It's a propaganda. It's all one word, propaganda. So let's talk about militainment. The DoD has an entertainment media office, the Department of Defense in the United States of America, that evaluates scripts and projects with the intent of controlling the message, the image, and the emotion communicated in any film which shows the American armed forces. That's a lot of movies.
That's a lot of movies, and that's not even movies strictly about military stuff.
I'm going to link in the show notes the Wikipedia page to any film that has received DoD funding through this militainment effort through the Entertainment Media Office. And I'm just going to read ones from the last 30 years that sound familiar, but this is literally a list of hundreds of movies. And this is why when you look back at World War One and World War Two, there were movies like, Defeat the Red Baron or Dogfighters and Boys or whatever that were just straight up propaganda. Especially you look at like John Wayne movies and other movies from the 50s, 60s. It was just about, you know what I wish I was? A boy storming a hill and dying for his country. It just is like grossly propagandistic. But I'm going to read, this is alphabetical order, but I'm just going to go through a bunch of movies and you just stop me if any blow your mind. Air Force One, 1997, Harrison Ford. Duh. Annapolis, 2006. Okay. Duh. Antoine Fisher. Apollo 13. Armageddon. Ben Affleck.
Yeah, not
1996.
surprised by that one.
Yeah. 1997. Batman Robin. George
Huh.
Clooney. Bat Nipples and the Military. Battleship 2012 on our list to talk about. Battle LA.
Of
Huh?
course.
Of course. Behind Enemy Lines. Speaking of Owen Wilson, a fantastic Owen Wilson movie. The Birth of a Nation, 1915. Okay.
I'm not surprised by that one, but wow.
Saying the quiet part out loud.
That's a
Um,
deep cut.
that was an old one I had to throw in because there's a fantastic TikTok about how terrible Woodrow Wilson was for our country, and he loved Birth of a Nation. That was the first movie screened in the White House. Did you know that?
Really?
All right. Black Hawk Down on our list. Captain Marvel on our list. Captain Phillips. Why?
Captain Phillips.
Yeah, Tom Hanks.
I mean, I guess
I
the
am.
military like comes and saves them, right?
Yep, they consulted on and provided money for that movie. Clear and Present Danger, Contact. We love Contact, so does the DoD. Deep Impact, Deja Vu, 2006. Day After Tomorrow, Flags of Our Fathers, Fly Away Home, the movie with geese.
Yeah, I was like, that's about geese and the hang gliders.
You could still join the military if you like geese. Godzilla 98, Godzilla 2014, I Am Legend, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Iron Man 2, also on our list. James Bond, Goldfinger from 64, Thunderball from 65, License to Kill from 89, GoldenEye from 95, Tomorrow Never Dies 97. Jurassic Park 3, I'm going to take an aside here. They put so much money into this movie.
I'm just like, what is the military presence in that movie?
At the very end, they roll up on the shores on location, but also made sure that none of the characters had a military background that were seedy. None of the seedy characters could be related to military at all.
Oh.
They couldn't be veterans, nothing.
Huh.
Anyways, King Kong 2005, which is the Peter Jackson one. Mac and Me. Midway 2019, obviously. Last Action Hero 93 with Arnold. Pet Cemetery from 89. I confused. Red Dawn and the remakes of the 84 and 2012. The Core 2003.
The Core. Oh my gosh, what a movie.
The Day the Earth Stood Still, the 1951 version. The Right Stuff from 83, of course. Astronauts, Moon, all right. How about The Rocketeer from 91? Have you ever seen that movie?
No, I don't think I have, actually.
That's actually a really fun, based on a comic, I believe. Silence of the Lambs, 91. Sum of All Fears, 2002. Star Trek 4, 1986. The American President, 95. The Perfect Storm, 2000. Top Gun Maverick, of course, also on our list. Transformers 07 on our list.
Yep.
Revenge of the Fallen 09. Dark of the Moon 2011. The Last Night 2017. Twister from 1996. True Lies from 94. United 93, 2006. We Were Soldiers 2002. Wonder Woman 1984, 2020. Wind Talkers 2002. Now that was minutes long of me listing off movies, and that again is less than a third of this list. And it's not fully up to date. It doesn't have anything from 2020s past Top Gun Maverick.
Wow.
So we're talking about a ton of movies. So I did a little looking. Glenn Roberts, who is the chief of the DoD Entertainment Media Office, at least from a couple years ago when I pulled some quotes from him, he says when they review a script, they're looking at 4 specific things. A, is there anything classified in the script that would harm the military or armed forces? Interesting.
How would a scriptwriter get a hold of classified things?
If they're writing something and the DoD makes them take it out, isn't that more suspect? If they showed the U.S. military flying small ball spheres and UFOs, and the military's like, classified, take it out, that's more damning.
Yeah, that's pretty sus.
So I just don't know what they're accomplishing there, but regardless. B, they ask, is it accurate? C, does the film and its script adhere to the DoD policy? That's 1984 language. Okay. D,
What is
proprietary.
DoD policy?
They didn't feel like listing it. They were like, it's internal. Does it adhere to our policy? D, propriety. Does the film adhere to the core values of the United States military? So he took a little of his own propaganda in these quotes, and he goes, just for example, if we're filming Captain Marvel and the scriptwriter has written a couple lines of dialogue, we will come in and say, you know what, a pilot would never say that. This is not how they would speak to each other, not how they would speak to commanding officer. We're going to change that. Now, that is fantastic.
Yeah, I get that. I understand that.
But I am going to draw a line in the sand. There are veterans who do not work for the United States military who have consulting firms that do the same thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to the military, but regardless, there's more reasons than
But
that.
do they also come with money?
That is what we're getting to next. So, for example, you can portray the military without their approval. And they specifically called out some movies that, again, was just damning. They did not support Apocalypse Now. I can't imagine
Of
why.
course they didn't.
They did not support Jarhead. Again, can't imagine why. And they did not support Full Metal Jacket. If it's critical, they're not exactly going to put money your way. So here is how they convince filmmakers to play by their rules. If you want to use military equipment, extras, they provide active military personnel as extras for your movie, and the expertise of the military, you have to play by their rules. So, for example, I'm going to talk a little bit about location fees. I don't know if you've ever looked into location fees. I was a set PA on a little tiny indie movie in 2019 with a budget of $250,000. That's a micro budget film. We had to pay $10,000 a day to a tiny, and I mean tiny restaurant down in Long Beach that was smaller than, my freshman college apartment, and we paid $10,000 a day to use this place.
Wow.
So we shot for 14 days on location. We're talking 140 grand. Now, the military, if you play by their rules, you can shoot on base for free. Any filming done on a military base is completely free. No location
Okay, I
fees.
see. I can see how that's appetizing.
And so for any director, when you're trying to balance budget and you've got a couple things that are critical in your script, you're going to drop them for the sake of the production. You want to see your film get made. Okay, so that's the first part. And like I said, real military background actors, whether we're talking about Battleship, which we'll talk about soon, or we're talking about Independence Day, Resurgence, or any of these other films, if you can have a whole garrison, if you could have, I'm using the wrong terms here, I'm so sorry, veterans. If you could have 200 people who are actually in the military, in military shape, in military clothing on your set, that's so much money saved. And they know how to follow orders. The next thing, there are massive tax breaks for filmmakers. And film credits are in discussion right now. I don't know if you listen to The Town, a podcast about movie making in LA. Different states and cities and places like that offer different tax incentives, rebates, tax breaks. All that factors into where you're going to shoot and why. The military just says free location shooting, free background actors, and even more tax breaks than most states can offer. So huge. And then they also provide free B-reel. If you're shooting on an aircraft carrier and the Navy has to send out a jet for patrol, you can film the jet taking off at no cost. The only time that they make you pay is if you're like, okay, the jet took off right to left. I want it to take off left to right on the backside of the carrier towards the sunset. And they're like, cool, you're going to have to pay us for that shot, for the fuel and everything
Yeah.
else. If not, you just literally have free B footage. You can just fill up your whole entire movie with B reel that they just are like, here, take it. If we're marching, you can film it. Then that's yours. So
Hmm.
anything that they're normally doing, you can take video of. Weapons testing, firing, shooting range, everything. So it really factors into a movie that you have all these opportunities available. Now, Renee Hobbs, who's a professor of comm studies at University of Rhode Island, had a pretty fantastic quote that I want to share where she says, when someone sits down to watch a movie in theaters or on Netflix or streaming, and they think, hey, this is just entertainment, that's the most dangerous opinion to hold. Because you
Ooh,
always
I like.
want to think about the business motives and the ideological and values motives. It's in the interest of the US government to ensure strong opinion for our armed forces. So, whether we're talking about Transformers or Marvel or otherwise, when you see a man in uniform who works for the United States or who is part of the United States military, just looking bold, brazen, unflinching, saving the day. Or in a Roland Emmerich disaster film, it's always the soldiers getting everybody out of there. I'm not saying that's not what actually happens. I'm just saying you have to know what that's doing to your brain. And it's
Yeah.
not even subliminal, it's in your face. It's completely cemented in there.
Yeah.
That same DoD head of the Entertainment Media Office, Glenn Roberts, says there is some product placement in the DoD Entertainment Media Office for sure, but we would also hope there's some recruitment here. But as a reminder, it's not propaganda. And then he goes on to say, he goes, propaganda is spreading untruthfulness in a desirable way, and that's not what we're doing. No, that's propaganda in what you just described propaganda as, my friend.
Yeah.
So we have a good setup here, and I'm going to share some quotes and some info. I really took a deep dive look at Independence Day, the first one, and Independence Day Resurgence. Now, we talked about Independence Day for our Aliens in America series. If you haven't listened to that, please go back and listen. Here's where I had some things a little bit mixed up and I'd forgotten. Independence Day did not have DoD funding, the first one. They didn't have
Really?
very much. No. So in the first film, released 1996, which became the second highest grossing film of all time at that point, 817.4 million worldwide, not adjusted for inflation. Before the film was released, Roland Emmerich wanted all of those military benefits. Tax cuts to use more of the planes, all these things. So he and the film's writer, Dean Devlin, and 20th Century Fox brass producers, whatever, they worked with the DoD in order to get more equipment and things like that. So some of the planes that is provided by the DoD, some of the outfits and some of the extras, okay. But David L. Robb, who wrote a fantastic book called Operation Hollywood, all about militainment, he said that even though the film didn't have full DoD funding, almost all of the script changes required by the DoD stuck. So Will Smith's character was originally a lot more sketchy and was a womanizer and whatever else. The DoD said, that's not what we want for the military image. He needs to be a family man. He needs to have no vices, no smoking, alcohol, nothing. And he needs to have no shortcomings. Now,
This guy can't be human. He can't be weak at all.
dear listener, you can't say it's not propaganda and then be like, by the way, our character can have absolutely no shortcomings.
Oh my gosh.
It gets better.
Actually, it's funny because like looking back at the movie now, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that makes total sense. In our episode, I even referenced like, how does Will Smith have all of the best lines in this movie? Welcome to Earth, and then he punches the alien. Like, yeah, okay.
We're going to establish a framework, maybe after this episode, a framework by which we can judge all the movies we're going to watch of, does it pass our litmus test for DoD funding? And one of them has to be badass lines and one-liners. And you know what? Almost everything on this list, I'm like, yeah, military personnel have some pretty killer one-liners. There's going to be one of those stinking lines. Other characters in Independence Day. Jeff Goldblum, who is pivotal to them being successful. He was given a retroactive veteran military background because they can't have a guy who's so smart he can defeat the aliens not be a veteran.
Ugh.
Randy Quaid, who is the crazy guy who swears he got, abducted and he flies the plane into the giant mothership to blow it up, who is the guy who just, boom, I'm going to do it, Mr. President. Also a veteran. Couldn't have just been a private pilot, couldn't have worked for Boeing and just flown commercial. Nah, had to be a vet. So, you want to know why the film was denied full DoD funding?
Because we blew up the White House?
Oh, that would have been good. I wish that was the only. It was denied funding because it alleged the Area 51 existed.
Oh my gosh.
Now let's go back to one more time. Let's go back.
Oh, no, that's not real. Oh my god.
The 4 reasons the Entertainment Office has to review these scripts. A, is there anything classified in there? A is an alien. A is an Area 51. It alleges that Area 51 exists. It shows they have alien bodies there and it shows they have a craft. And the DoD goes, take it out. This is all pre-huge internet. 1996, there were, some weirdos on the internet. There was HTML. No one's on there doing hardcore research. But everyone knew about Area 51. X-Files. I mean, we all knew about this, right? And the DoD goes, you can't allege it exists. Wild.
That's
absolutely wild.
Good for Roland Emmerich for sticking to his guns and keeping that in the movie then, because I mean that's a pretty pivotal part of the plot.
But also there's some level of laziness where I'm like, Will Smith as a dork again, give him some vices, make him a womanizer. Okay, but you know what? It's fine. We can let it slide. Yeah. So that's like the first little part of it. So I'm gonna rewind now and give a quick history so we can come back to Independence Day versus Resurgence.
Okay.
Propaganda as a term and as a accepted practice, if you will, has origins in the 17th century, so 1600s. Now, I would say even longer because Christianity and Islam and every other religion and every state and every government, Rome existed. Yeah. You can't say there was no propaganda, but regardless, propaganda is a term and an idea. They say originated 17th century. It really grew as a practice during World War I. And there's a guy, Edward Bernays, who's an American PR practitioner who I wish everybody knew about. If you're a fan or if you know who Noam Chomsky is, Noam Chomsky does a lot of deep dives in Edward Bernays. But here's the thing, Edward Bernays wrote a bunch of books himself where he just calls out exactly what he does. So if we're going to talk about propaganda for a second, the reason that women smoke cigarettes is Edward Bernays. Women never smoked cigarettes. It was not seen as a sightly thing to do or cool. It was a matter of like, first off, it's gross. It's what men do. Their teeth get stained. They have all this coughing. It's just gross. We don't do it. So there was two sides of the coin of you shouldn't do it because you're a woman of class, expectations placed upon them. And also, even though they didn't know it was killing anybody, it wasn't a desirable thing. So you have this massive parade that goes through New York, and Edward Bernays is working for a tobacco company that wants to sell to women. And he says, you know what? I'm going to dress up all these model American women, beautiful women, dress them up like the Statue of Liberty with the crown and all, and I'm going to have them lighting up cigarettes across the entire parade.
Oh
And they
no.
all did. And he got photographers and journalists to find these women specifically and capture the moment. And it became a giant media heyday of women saying, we're working towards suffrage. And by the way, we're smoking cigarettes. It's ours now.
Wow.
Tobacco sales to women skyrocketed, obviously from 0 to a few percent to massive amounts. This literally rippled for 100 years. We're coming out of smoking now, right? That was
Kind
PR.
of.
That was
Yeah.
his propaganda. He was like, you know what? I'm going to change the entire culture with a feeling and an emotion, and you're not even going to know why you're doing it.
Wow.
And that's what it became. He created these pseudo events in order to sell people on an idea and convince them, I'm not selling you a product like an advertisement. I'm selling you a feeling and a look, and you're like, I am that. Therefore, I will purchase. So when we're talking about propaganda in film, it's the same thing. You are selling an idea through emotions. The Allied countries criticized and demonized the Nazis for their use of propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
But the Nazis were copying American filmmakers and their use of propaganda. The Americans had done such a good job during World War I, and so had the Brits, that and other Nazi leaders, like Goebbels and Hitler, they were just trying to capture that, and they did a really good job, right? A whole
Hmm.
nation and area, and as well as all the Nazi Party in the United States, who just bought it hook, line, and sinker. All these horrible ideas came from the power of film, radio, television.
Oh my gosh.
So, scholars have pointed out attention has been given to the role of PR and the media in selling war or selling peace as a matter of military policy. So, as part of the policy and the strategy of the military, they literally are thinking, how do we sell war or peace? American political scientist Harry D. Laswell said, propaganda in the broadest sense is the technique of influencing human action by the manipulation of representations that can be spoken, written, pictorial, or musical form. It's manipulating these ideas that is so important. Roger Stahl, who wrote Militainment Inc., it's a foundational book, he points out that journalists and their promotion of militaristic ideas within the 24-hour news cycle, in addition to video games like 2000's America's Army, but also Call of Duty, Battlefield, anything that
Mm-hmm.
involves the United States military, in combination with films and television centered on the U.S. military and partnering with Hollywood has created some of the most recognizable and effective propaganda. So the
Yeah.
DoD, as we talked about, has funded tons of projects. And whether you call it propaganda or persuasion, each one has a little element that pushes you towards a certain feeling with the military. I'm sorry, folks. The U.S. military published a case study on their own PR and propaganda tactics.
Like public facing?
It's a PDF. Yeah, public facing. They gave a presentation on how well they're doing. Our Sentinella 2016, they gave a full report on Independence Day and the US Army and its involvement. They're not even hiding it. So in the case study, they say that by working closely with 20th Century Fox and the movie's writers and directors, we went beyond our typical movie partnership by integrating messaging about the Army and its advanced capabilities into the Independence Day Resurgence narrative. So they were mad in the first one that the military itself couldn't beat the aliens, that it had to be a military personnel and a veteran and Jeff Goldblum and Will Smith, but it wasn't the military. And the DoD said for the new one, we're going to make it clear we have the abilities to beat the aliens. They created a fake military force that was a combined military force for the whole world because we wouldn't be Americans if we didn't believe we were the whole world. They called it the Earth Space Defense. They were a well-equipped, technologically advanced, and vigilant fighting force. Stahl, one of the other authors of Operation Hollywood, pointed out that when the DoD funds projects, they want it to be seen by a large audience, oftentimes a global audience, so that the entire world is convinced of the efficacy, technological advancement, and moral righthood of the
Oh
American
my
military.
gosh.
So that
Ooh, that doesn't give me a good feeling in my stomach.
no matter what country we step foot in, they should like us because of movies.
Yeah.
And I don't love China. But you have to understand why China has shut out Hollywood recently.
Yeah.
They're over it. They don't want to see any more Marvel movies. They did so well over there, but they also recognize they want to put out their own propaganda. And I wish we might have a
Huh.
time in our final episode about their movies. They are hilarious to the level of Bollywood insanity.
Yeah.
One Chinese ship fighting off 40 American ships. They're doing their own version now because they saw how effective it was. Marshall Souls points out that mimesis, coming from the word mime, is
Hmm.
representing or imitating the real world in art and film propaganda. So, if you can have a fake enemy that could be replaced with any real enemy, you've done the work of propaganda. Because
Hmm.
no one's going to know the difference. If you're fighting aliens, if you're fighting Russians, if you're fighting terrorists, it's all the same thing. You can just
Yeah.
replace the enemy and they've got the same feeling. So I looked at the 20th Century Fox and U.S. Army campaign, and I'm going to share my screen and hope we have the audio from this.
20 years ago, the world escaped the clutches of extinction. We must never forget our survival is only possible when we stand together. We have found strength and unity as a planet, and that strength has brought us the power to survive.
When the world was brought to its knees, the Army was there to fight back. Promised us that this would never happen again. They have been the driving force in uniting nations around the world to form the most powerful weapon against another attack. The Earth Space Defense. Brave men and women of the ESD are making sure that the War of '96 will never happen again. Join Earth Space Defense. Next time, we will be prepared.
Now, for everyone who just listened to that clip, we added in here. I'll also have that linked. They created a fake military campaign for the movie about joining the Earth Space Defense Force. Wonderful, right? Oh, really cool in-world advertisements. Here's the problem. If you clicked at the end of the video and went to the Join the ESD page, they had mini games and brain games everywhere. They talked about in this and many other commercials, the brave men and women of the ESD are making sure that the War of '96 will never happen again. Join Earth Space Defense. Next time we'll be prepared. Join ESD.com. So here's the problem. When you gamify propaganda, it's even more effective than just watching it because now you're
Yeah.
interacting with and creating an emotional response in your own brain with what you're doing. So on ESD.com, they had a fictional history of the ESD and how it started. Will Smith memorialized. Fantastic. Cool. Puzzles, brain games based on science, technology, engineering, and math, testing the user's aptitude. Now, I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but we're going to. Cookies and tracking and everything else and form entering is a great use on the internet for collecting information on people. But even better than that is Facebook and other social media sites. And when you have to allow access to Facebook, that is everything you've ever posted, your friends, who you're connected to, your school, your education, anything you've put on there or interacted with is then given to whoever says you logged in with Facebook. So, the informational website, you had to give Facebook access to play all the games and get results. And then in the bottom left-hand corner of every part of the website, it wasn't Join ESD. It was a link to Army. Join the United States Army.
Oh my gosh.
It's almost comical at this point, right?
I joined the army, mother.
You gave them access to your Facebook and in order to get exclusive content before the film's release, trailers, stills, art, everything. And it was a trade. And so the marketing group, McCann World Group, that did this and came up with this scheme, they also published papers talking about how good of a job they did. And they said, this whole website allows us to tell the U.S. Army recruitment story in a new and more relevant way.
I don't like that at all.
They say, we are not shy about our hopes for increased interest in recruitment from our advertisements and websites that accompanied Independence Day Resurgence.
Damn.
The ESD heroes of the film perfectly mimic the United States Army everyday heroes that protect our country. And a global audience will see, relate to, and create positive associations between the ESD and the United States Army. So to wrap it all up, in the last few thoughts, the D&D and Army work really hard to manipulate behavior and beliefs for greater recruitment and retention, and they make the distinction that propaganda is a form of communication that attempts to achieve a response that furthers the intent of the propagandist, whereas persuasion merely attempts to satisfy the needs of persuader and persuadee. They did not want persuasion, they wanted propaganda because you want your ideology pushed forward. You'd rather not have dissidents at any single point in this whole process. The internal case study that the military proudly published for anyone to go look at stated that daily visits to the U.S. Army career and tech web pages increased by 46% following the Join ESD campaign.
Wow.
46% higher. You know, every website would kill for a 46% increase after a campaign.
Yeah.
I'm working in marketing. We're going for a 0.7% increase on one of our web pages. We're like, that's doable, maybe. We're talking about millions of dollars. Inquiries made to the Army Careers website and to recruiting offices rose by 80% from the beginning of the ESD Independence Day campaign through the theatrical run of the film. People saw advertisements, and 80% more than usual went into an office or went online and said, tell me about a career.
Wow.
I just wish it didn't work, you know? I wish I'm like, we're smarter than this. We can't be so
No.
easily swayed. But we're talking about the most powerful forms of visual and emotive manipulation in order to bring a feeling that says, this is right, this is honorable, this is good.
I mean, what it's doing is it's highlighting the power of storytelling and how important it is to what it means to be human. And that we need to be really cognizant about the stories that we're ingesting because they have an impact on our psychology and our lives.
You know, there's that quote that I don't even know who originally said it. It's become idiomatic at this point. You are a combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You know that one?
Yeah.
We are a combination of the media that we ingest the most. And there's just no way to watch things and not be impacted by it. You can tell yourself, no, it's just a show. It's just a movie. It's just a game. And I remember growing up, my parents were always like, Halo, these rated M games with killing everybody, it can't be good for your brain. And I was like, that's dumb. No. To a certain extent, we have to recognize that we are not as robotic as we think we are. Now, I will say this. Here's the light at the end of the tunnel, and I want to make a previously unmade connection here. The DoD publishes recruitment statistics every year for everyone to see. Let's talk about recruitment numbers. It's in the 4 to 5 figure range, with active military being in the 6 figures every year. It's about 5 to 10,000 a year, with about 470 to 480,000 active military personnel in any given year. And it grew from 471 to 481 between 2016 and 2020. Now, is 10,000 enough to say that this campaign created more active duty military to not only replenish and replace, but also increase? I don't think so.
So wait, are recruitment numbers going down?
They're still staying within 5 to 10,000, but they're not going up as high as they thought they were going to at this point.
Yeah, interesting.
I would offer, I do declare things like TikTok and the absence of oversight and propaganda to the same level is doing something, I would hope. Winston Churchill said, in wartime, truth is so precious, she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies. And I think that
Ooh.
still holds true in our government and military today. And if we're always in the war on terror, or we've talked about now there's Ukraine and there's Israel, there's just more opportunities for it to be consistent wartime. There's going to be a bodyguard of lies, and this bodyguard is good. There's one more quote, and I hate that I'm quoting this person, but it is a proper propagandist. The quote is, "Through clever and constant application of propaganda, people can be made to see paradise as hell, and also the other way around, to consider the most wretched sort of life as paradise." That was evil Uncle Adolf. That's Adolf Hitler.
That was Adolf Hitler?
That was
Oh
Adolf Hitler.
no.
The man
Oh
understood
no.
propaganda.
The
So,
man everyone hates just made a great point.
yeah, as Rob says in his book Operation Hollywood about militainment, that's what movie making is all about for the Pentagon. Putting a positive inner image of the military on screen so that kids will like what they see so much that they will join up one day and be in the armed forces. So, throughout our entire series, we are going to look at the films of the last 20 years, and maybe even older, that have had military funding, what that looks like, and if it passes a litmus test of pure propaganda, mostly propaganda, or propaganda enough. We're going to be looking first at Transformers and Battleship.
So good.
Then the next week, we're going to look at Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick. Then we're going to go full military, and we're going to go Black Hawk Down and Pearl Harbor. And we're going to wrap it up with thinly veiled propaganda in Iron Man, the first one from 2008, Captain America, the first one from 2011, and Captain Marvel from 2019. We hope if you want to listen with us, you'll join us on this journey. We will list all the links in these show notes of where to watch every single movie. Watch, take some notes on your phone if something sticks out. We're not telling you to go woke. We're just telling you to open your eyes and understand that when the DoD has an influence on a film, it should be apparent here or there.
I wonder if is that made clear in the credits of a movie? Because I know if you stay through all the credits at the end, it's tax benefits from Quebec or from Georgia or from New Zealand or whatever, for location shots. But is it made clear in the credits that the DoD provided funding?
I will do some further looking. I'll have that
Yeah.
answer for us.
Yeah. It feels like it should just come with a warning label. That is not to say that the movies that the Department of Defense funds are inherently bad, or all propaganda isn't bad, right? We're going to be talking about some of these movies, and by golly, I love some of these movies that we're going to be talking about. I think part of the reason behind doing this series that I think we're going to come back to over and over again is we need to be aware of the stories that we're consuming and who stands to gain by the telling of that story, so that we don't become susceptible to someone else's influence unduly.
And that is, yes, that is the important part. I would not stop watching Air Force One just because the DoD put some money there.
No, Top Gun Maverick is a phenomenal movie. It's almost perfect.
It is a phenomenal
And
movie.
I'm not going to stop watching it just because it's a piece of propaganda.
While we've been on the call, I did look up just a little bit. People did say at the end of the Flash movie, the words, "The producers would like to thank the Department of Defense," appear within the credits. There is a thanks there. So I would say some do, but I don't believe it's a hard and fast rule that you have to list it. I don't know if I've ever seen the symbol for Film Georgia and then the U.S. Army logo. I don't think I've ever seen those two things together. Maybe Top Gun would have it more clearly. That is a good distinction. No one should listen to this series being like, we're all becoming anti-American. That's not what it is. It's just recognizing propaganda, and I hope through this series you'll be able to look at and recognize propaganda in all of its other forms. Because whether we're talking about propaganda of certain races and classes and what their jobs are or education levels, or we're talking about familial structures, that is still a sort of propaganda of propagating a feeling and a belief through the visual medium. But you got to check your biases and you got to check your sources.
Yeah. Now it's making me think of all the video games I've ever played.
Yeah. Did you ever play America's Army?
No, I didn't. But I played plenty of Call of Duty, and some of those levels and cinematic set pieces were intense and powerful. And of course they were.
Yeah.
Of course they were. I remember playing Halo 3, and I know that the UNSC is not the US military, but there are certain levels of that game where I'm just hell yeah, humans with tanks and guns, we're beating the aliens. This is amazing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's just moments where you can't help but hand on the heart and look for a flag, you know?
Yeah, like when we watch Pearl Harbor, dude, I'm gonna come out of that like with my hand on my heart.
We
And
we watched Masters of the Air, and it was like when he hangs that flag, it's pretty
well,
patriotic.
it's just the power of film and cinematic storytelling is so potent on the human psyche and spirit. Like that's really, I think, the real crux of what this series is going to be, and like, and our podcast in general, you know, is that like stories and movies and cinema are incredibly powerful, and we need to be aware of that power as we're engaging with it, or else it will act on us.
The moment you forget about the status quo and act like it doesn't exist is the moment you're a complete slave to it, right? And I
Yes.
think that's what we have to really take note of. Whether people are talking about any of the social movements of the last 100,000, 2,000 years, or whatever, if you don't recognize what's at play, that's just willful ignorance and playing into relinquishing your own choice and ability to think about something and make a decision for yourself. So, yes, I think when we're talking about visual mediums, again, we have a soul, and our soul can be easily moved by the emotions of our body. There are, and maybe we'll talk about this at one point, there are case studies about how if you use the right resonant frequency in your music and hertz and timing of putting music to a video clip, you can evoke an emotional response. There are companies that do this in advertising. They say, I know that if I show this sequence of images followed by a musical score that hits right here, you're going to feel something in your heart. And I
Oh
think
no.
movies are able to do it really well.
Oh no, I'm just thinking about Transformers right now. Oh no, I've been changed.
You know, I'm a huge Jurassic Park fan. I love the third one, but even as a kid, I was like, why is the military rolling up on the beach and they're like pointing guns? There's not even a dinosaur in sight that would have eaten these guys. Nothing. But it was a feeling of safety of, now we're
Yes.
safe. The military's here. And you just shouldn't have the same feelings for your mother that you have for the military of, thank heavens they're home. That just does not need to be on the same level.
No, it doesn't.
So it'll be fun, and we'll point out a lot of scenes. I think it'll be good for us to watch these movies and go, there was a audio cue followed by some really cool tech scenes of looking at radars and computers, followed
Yeah.
with just the most epic flyby of all time. It is a
Yeah.
faceless pilot. We have the reflective, eye visor. It's a hero. It's a modern day superhero every time you see the military come in.
And they get the best lines.
They get the best lines. And they get the coolest moments of like Transformers. You have that thing coming out of the sand. It's like, all right, let's drop them. Let's give them hell. Firing from the sky.
Bring the rain. Just like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, I've been so influenced by this. Okay, shit, dude.
It's going to be a fun series. Maybe fun's the wrong word.
Enlightening.
It's going to be an enlightening series. And again, I'm not one who hates these movies. That list I gave has a ton of movies I absolutely love. They're good
the
movies.
Transformers movies. I love the
Yeah.
Transformers movies. I know they're fun to hate on, but I'm nothing if not like I just like them, you know? I just think they're neat.
So does the DoD. And we are going to leave it there. Join us next week as we talk about 2012's Battleship and 2007's Transformers. Until then, watch great movies and TV, listen to good music, and if you like this podcast and you're interested in this topic, share with friends, family, classmates, teachers, whomever else, as we're going to dig into militainment propaganda and the power of it in film.